What happens when a native boy walks into an elite history classroom and gets humiliated for the way he speaks? When the teacher mocks his accent, silences his story, and tells him that only proper English belongs in education. She didn't know that the voice she tried to erase would become the one that redefined the entire school. And this isn't just about disrespect. It's about what happens when the truth refuses to be quiet. Stick around, because what this boy does next will shake the whole system. And hey, if stories like this move you, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. That's how we keep bringing these voices to light, voices that matter. "Excuse me," the teacher said, cocking her head to the side. "Do you want to try that again in English this time?" The classroom went still. Liam Standing Cloud, 16, froze halfway through his sentence. His heart pounded against his ribs, his face burning red. The words he had just spoken, clear, thoughtful, and articulate, still hung in the air, untouched. But somehow Miss Emerson had acted as if he were speaking another language, or worse, as if his voice didn't deserve to be heard. Around him, students chuckled, low and nervous. A few looked away, a few smirked. Liam stood tall at the back of the room, hands at his sides, jaw clenched tight. He'd said, "Actually, the Cherokee weren't granted full citizenship until 1924. It was correct. It was factual. But that wasn't the problem. The problem was how he said it. Slowly, with a soft Midwestern drawl shaped by generations of Lakota inflection. It wasn't broken English. It was ancestral cadence. Miss Emerson, the school's award-winning history teacher known for her rigorous approach and immaculate blazer collection, smiled the kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes. "This is American history, Mr. Standing Cloud," she said with sharp emphasis. "Let's keep it to the version everyone understands." Liam didn't reply. Not yet, not because he didn't want to, but because if he said what he was really thinking, it would erupt like thunder. Instead, he sat down slowly, quietly. But the fire in his chest didn't dim, because this wasn't the first time. It wasn't even the fifth. Every week in her class, Miss Emerson spoke of manifest destiny like it was a noble mission, of colonizers like they were visionaries, and of native tribes as obstacles in westward expansion. And every time Liam raised his hand to offer a correction, a nuance, a lived perspective passed down through story, she'd roll her eyes, dismiss it, or, in moments like this, humiliate him. He had come to Alder Valley Prep on scholarship, a full ride. His test scores were top 2% in the state, but none of that seemed to matter when he opened his mouth. That day, when the final bell rang, Liam didn't rush out. He stayed behind and watched Miss Emerson speak to a group of PTA parents visiting the class. "We're really trying to teach critical thinking," she said, "though some students have trouble separating fact from folktale." Liam clenched his teeth. Folktale. That night at home, Liam sat across from his grandfather Wakesa in their two-room home near the reservation edge. The old man stirred soup in a battered pot, humming an old Dakota tune. "You're quiet," he said finally. Liam didn't look up from his homework. "It's nothing." Wakesa chuckled softly. Nothing usually sounds like thunder in the chest. Liam hesitated, then told him everything. The comment, the look, the laughter. His voice shook. "It's like she's trying to erase me without ever touching me." The elder nodded. "That's how they do it now, not with guns, with silence, with shame." Liam stared at the pot, steam rising. "She made fun of my accent." Wakasa leaned forward, eyes sharp but warm. "That accent?" That's the sound of survival. Every vowel, every pause, is a story they couldn't kill. Something shifted inside Liam. The next morning, he didn't walk into history class with shame. He walked in with purpose. But what he didn't know was that Miss Emerson had prepared something special today. A class debate on the most significant founding fathers. The groups were pre-assigned. Liam was paired with two legacy kids, Trevor Sinclair and Maddie Gleaves, children of donors, both used to leading every presentation. Trevor sneered when Liam sat down. "We're doing Jefferson. You just read the intro, okay?" Liam raised an eyebrow. "Why Jefferson?" "Because he wrote the Declaration of Independence," Trevor replied smugly. Liam didn't argue, not yet. But later that day, when their group stood to present, Liam stepped forward without cue and said calmly, "Thomas Jefferson wrote that all men are created equal, while owning over 600 slaves, many of whom were children." The room fell silent. Ms. Emerson's jaw tightened. "That's not the focus of today's discussion." Liam didn't back down. "No," he said, "but it should be." Liam's words still echoed in the classroom. It should be. No one moved. Even the rustle of notebook pages had stopped. Miss Emerson's fingers tightened around her clipboard. She forced a smile that cracked at the corners. "Thank you for your perspective, Liam. Let's move on." Trevor glared at him as they returned to their seats. "What the hell was that?" "The truth," Liam replied evenly. "You might want to try it sometime." Trevor opened his mouth to snap back, but Maddie elbowed him. "Don't. He just made you look stupid without raising his voice." By the end of the day, Liam's words had spread. Whispers rippled down hallways, in locker rooms, at lunch tables. Some laughed, some were stunned, and a few, especially other students of color, started looking at Liam a little differently. Later that afternoon, Miss Emerson sat in the staff lounge with a cup of tea and trembling fingers. "He undermined me," she said aloud, though no one had asked. "He's just emotional. He doesn't understand academic discourse." Across the room, Mr. Ramirez, the literature teacher, looked up slowly. "He sounded pretty academic to me." Emerson scoffed. "He's trying to insert identity politics into history." Ramirez shrugged. "Maybe because identity is history." The next day, Miss Emerson assigned a surprise essay. Who owns history? A provocative prompt, one she was sure would reassert her authority, draw the class back into her carefully curated frame. But she made one mistake. She told them to present their essays aloud. On Friday, Liam stood before the class. His essay pages trembled slightly in his hands, but his voice did not. "Who owns history?" he read aloud. "The people who lived it, not the ones who survived to write it down." Eyes lifted. Miss Emerson looked up from her laptop. "History isn't neutral," he continued. "It's written by those who had the power to record it, but those who were silenced, indigenous peoples, enslaved people, immigrants, they carried their truths in songs, in bones, in memory. My people don't own the textbooks, but we own the pain, and pain remembers." The room was breathless. Liam set the paper down. "People say I talk funny, that my words sound different, but maybe the way I speak isn't broken. Maybe it's just uncolonized." A gasp from the back of the room. Someone whispered, "Damn." Miss Emerson stood slowly. "That's enough." But Liam wasn't finished. "You said we should speak clearly, that our accents distract from serious history. But what you really mean is that you want us to sound like you. That's not education, that's erasure." Miss Emerson's face paled. A student raised their hand. "Can I go next?" Another followed. "Me too." What happened over the next 30 minutes stunned even the teacher. One by one, students stood. Some read essays about their black grandparents who had marched in Selma. Others spoke of Chinese railroad workers erased from local monuments. One Latina girl cried as she talked about how her abuela wasn't even allowed to speak Spanish in her own school growing up. Even Maddie, surprisingly, shared how her great-great-grandmother was part Cherokee but had to hide it to marry into a wealthy Boston family. By the time the bell rang, no one had checked their phones. Even Ms. Emerson hadn't interrupted again. As the class filtered out, she sat at her desk, unmoving. Liam was last to leave. As he passed, she said quietly, "You're very persuasive." Liam turned. "I'm not trying to persuade. I'm trying to be heard." He walked out. On Monday morning, something had changed. Liam entered the school and felt it instantly. The shift in the air, the sideways glances, the quick whispers. He wasn't invisible anymore. He was now that kid, the one who stood up, the one who spoke out. And not everyone liked it. By third period, he was called to the main office. Waiting for him was Principal Harrow, a tall, polished man with a voice like velvet and a smile that never quite reached his eyes. "Liam, come in," he said. "Please, have a seat." Liam stayed standing. Harrow cleared his throat. "I've received a few concerns about how class discussions are unfolding in Miss Emerson's room." "Concerns?" Liam repeated, eyebrow raised. "Well," the principal continued, "it seems your recent presentations have stirred quite a reaction. Some students felt uncomfortable." Liam blinked. "So, telling the truth is uncomfortable now." Harrow smiled tightly. "It's important to foster open dialogue, yes, but it's also important not to derail the curriculum with personal agendas." "Personal?" Liam's voice stayed calm, but his jaw clenched. "My people's genocide is not a personal agenda." A flicker of frustration crossed Harrow's face. "Let's not exaggerate." "Exaggerate?" Liam leaned forward, voice steady but sharp. "Over 500 tribes, tens of millions of acres stolen, languages banned, children taken. Which part should I minimize so everyone can stay comfortable?" There was silence. Finally, Harrow folded his hands. "I'm going to ask you to keep your comments more on topic moving forward." Liam didn't answer. He just nodded once, turned, and walked out. Back in class, Miss Emerson didn't look up when he entered. She didn't call on him the rest of the week. When Liam raised his hand, she ignored it. When he submitted his assignments, they came back with vague notes like "too political" or "off focus." One day, she passed out new textbooks, gleaming hardcovers stamped with a national publisher's logo. As she walked by Liam's desk, she paused. "Stick to the assigned reading this time, please." Liam opened the book. Chapter 6. Westward Expansion and the American Spirit. He scanned the pages. The Trail of Tears got half a paragraph. The Wounded Knee Massacre wasn't even mentioned. That night, Liam met again with his grandfather. "They're trying to erase me," he said, "again, silently this time." Wikasa nodded slowly. "Then you make noise, grandson. Not with shouting, but with proof." Liam's eyes narrowed. "What kind of proof?" His grandfather leaned back, eyes twinkling. "The kind they can't ignore. Your mother used to say, if they won't give you a microphone, build your own stage." Those words stayed with Liam all night. The next day, he created a Google Doc. He titled it, "Truth You Won't Find in Your Textbook." He began filling it with real accounts, primary sources, historical records, links to indigenous authors, maps, and personal stories passed down through oral tradition. He invited others to contribute. By the end of the week, 13 students had joined. By the end of the month, the doc had over 200 contributors, including students from other schools. They began reading from it during class discussions. One day, Maddie stood up and read a quote from the doc. "Education is not neutral. It either functions to domesticate or liberate." Paulo Freire, Miss Emerson, said nothing. But Principal Harrow did. Liam was summoned again, this time not alone. His father was there. A quiet man with strong hands and dark eyes. He wore his best flannel and a look of worry. "We're getting complaints," Harrow said. "This document, it's spreading misinformation." Liam replied calmly, "Everything in that document is sourced and cited." "That may be," Harrow said, "but it's not part of the approved curriculum." Liam's father finally spoke. "Maybe it should be." Harrow's jaw tightened. "We're considering disciplinary action if this continues." Liam looked his father in the eye. "They want me to stop." His father didn't blink. "So, what are you going to do?" Liam didn't hesitate. "I'm going to speak louder." It started as a whisper, then a ripple, then a wave. The document Liam created, "Truth You Won't Find in Your Textbook," spread like wildfire. It wasn't just a shared folder anymore. It was a movement. Students began printing pages, posting quotes on their lockers, adding footnotes to their homework with links from Liam's sources. In the cafeteria, someone spray-painted a quote from Chief Seattle across a poster board. "Take only memories, leave only footprints." Soon, history classes across multiple grades were having a very different kind of discussion. And Ms. Emerson, she hated every second of it. She'd begun holding closed-door staff meetings, warning other teachers about ideological interference, calling it a crisis of discipline. But the tide was shifting. Too many students had begun asking questions. Too many parents had started noticing the gaps in their children's curriculum. Then came the flyer. One Monday morning, every student at Alder Valley Prep found a folded sheet of paper in their locker. "Who tells the story of America? Join us this Friday after school for the first student-led teach-in. Voices that were silenced will speak. Truth that was buried will rise." There was no name on it, but everyone knew. Liam. That Friday, nearly 80 students packed into the auditorium. Teachers stood near the doors, unsure whether to stop it or watch it unfold. One by one, students took the mic. A Vietnamese girl shared about her grandfather's experience during the fall of Saigon. How American textbooks made it sound like order was restored, while her family drowned in war. A black student read a letter from his great-uncle who marched on Washington and was arrested the same night. A Palestinian girl cried as she read from her father's diary, words of a homeland she'd never seen. And then came Liam. He stepped onto the stage holding only a single object, a weathered red leather journal, his grandfather's. He didn't use slides, he didn't need them. "My name is Liam Standing Cloud. I'm Lakota. My voice is shaped by stories older than the borders of this country. And today, I'm going to tell you about the other Declaration of Independence, the one you've never read." He opened the journal and began. He spoke of treaties broken by the U.S. government. 371 signed, all violated. He told the story of the Carlisle Indian Industrial School, where Native children were beaten for speaking their language. He described the ghost dance, the Wounded Knee Massacre, and the women who sang while bullets flew. His voice cracked only once, when he read a line his grandfather had written at age 15. "They told us our accent was ugly, but it's just the sound of our ancestors trying to survive inside our mouths." When Liam looked up, there were tears in the crowd. Even some teachers stood motionless. Miss Emerson? She wasn't in the room, but someone else was. District Superintendent Marion Duval, a sharp-eyed woman known for silence more powerful than any speech. She sat in the back row, watching every word, every reaction. After the event, Liam walked out into the hallway and found her waiting. "Young man," she said, her voice neutral, "that was powerful." Liam didn't respond. She continued. "We're reviewing all cultural curriculum policies next month. I'd like you to speak. Officially." Liam blinked. "As a guest?" "No," she said, "as a consultant." Before he could answer, a new storm was brewing. That Monday morning, Ms. Emerson posted something on her personal blog titled, "The Rise of Revisionism: How Victim Narratives Are Undermining American Education." It went viral for all the wrong reasons. Screenshots spread across Reddit, Twitter, TikTok. One paragraph read, "We cannot allow emotion to replace objectivity in our classrooms. History must remain unsullied by personal grievances, especially from students who don't even speak proper English." That sentence lit the match. By noon, the school was trending. Let Liam speak. Decolonize the curriculum. We're history too. Inside the faculty lounge, Ms. Emerson's phone buzzed endlessly. She didn't answer, because this time she knew. She wasn't the one telling the story anymore. The blog post was supposed to silence him. Instead, it set everything on fire. Within 24 hours, Liam's inbox was flooded. Reporters from local and national outlets were requesting interviews. Indigenous advocacy groups began tagging the school district in threads. Alumni of Alder Valley Prep posted testimonials of their own experiences being ignored, silenced, or mocked in history class. And at the center of it all, Liam Standing Cloud. He didn't ask to become the face of a movement, but now he couldn't walk down the hall without someone high-fiving him, asking for a quote or whispering, "Thank you." Even students who once rolled their eyes were now pulling chairs closer in the class, listening, taking notes. Then came the invitation. A formal letter, sealed and stamped, delivered to Liam's homeroom by a teacher who didn't meet his eyes. "You are hereby invited to testify before the Oak County School Board's Curriculum Oversight Committee on the matter of culturally responsive teaching standards and classroom inclusion." Date: Thursday. Location: District Office. Time: 4 p.m. Liam's stomach twisted. He'd stood in front of students on makeshift stages, even in community forums. But this was a formal hearing. A room full of adults in suits who had never once pronounced his last name correctly. He took the letter home, showed it to his grandfather. Wicasa read it, folded it, and placed it in Liam's hand. "Your voice carries the sound of generations," he said, "and now it's going to echo through their walls." Liam spent the next 3 days preparing. He reread Supreme Court rulings. He compiled testimonies from classmates. He included data, like how only 13% of U.S. history standards mention Native Americans after 1900. He stayed up late writing his speech, and then rewrote it again. Thursday arrived. The district office was white, glassy, cold. Security guards stood at every door. In the hearing room, rows of chairs were filled. Parents, students, reporters, even former teachers. The school board sat behind a long table, hands folded, expressions unreadable. Ms. Emerson sat in the back row, arms crossed. Liam stepped to the podium. The microphone was too high. He adjusted it, cleared his throat. "My name is Liam Standing Cloud," he began. "I am a sophomore at Alder Valley Prep, and I am Lakota. Today, I speak not just for myself, but for every student who has ever been told their voice doesn't belong in a history class." He held up his copy of the district-approved textbook. This book gives 5 pages to Native Americans. 5. In a 600-page book, one of those pages is a painting of Pocahontas. The rest is war. Liam paused, letting the silence speak. I was mocked for my accent, told to keep my history on topic. But history is about perspective, and you cannot teach the truth if you're afraid of whose voice it comes in. He took a breath. History is not a neutral story. It's a battlefield of memory. And the winners of that battle aren't the ones with better weapons. They're the ones who got to write it down. Some murmurs in the crowd. One board member adjusted his glasses. Liam continued. My voice, our voices, aren't a threat to education. They are education. If we can memorize the names of 44 presidents, we can also remember the tribes they displaced. If we can recite the Constitution, we can also acknowledge it once counted my ancestors as not taxed, less than people. Someone in the back clapped once, then stopped. Liam ended with one sentence. I'm not asking you to rewrite history. I'm asking you to stop pretending it was ever written right in the first place. When he stepped back, the room was dead silent, and then it wasn't. The applause erupted, not polite but raw, rising like thunder from every corner. Some teachers stood, several parents cried, even 2 board members nodded subtly. Only Miss Emerson didn't move. Her jaw clenched, her grip white-knuckled on her chair. After the hearing, Liam walked into the lobby, exhausted. A woman approached him, sharp suit, clipboard, calm eyes. Liam Standing Cloud? She asked. He nodded. I'm Dr. Anita Rose, Director of Academic Equity for the State Board. We'd like to meet with you next week. We're considering forming a student advisory committee on curriculum reform, and we want you on it. Liam blinked. I'm just a student. Dr. Rose smiled. Exactly. That night, Ms. Emerson sat alone in her classroom. The lights were off. Her chair creaked under the stillness. Her fingers hovered over her keyboard, then curled into fists. She had just finished watching the live recording of the school board hearing. Liam's words echoed in her head like a drumbeat she couldn't stop. And then came the email from District Office. Subject, curriculum review and temporary suspension of lecturing duties. She stared at the screen. Her throat dried. There it was, in corporate, measured language. She was being removed from direct classroom instruction until the investigation concluded. Her hands trembled. This wasn't just about a student speaking out. This was about her legacy unraveling in real time. Down the hallway, Liam sat in the library with Dr. Rose and 2 other members from the state board. Papers spread across the table. Curriculum samples, lesson plan rubrics, district statistics. He felt like he was swimming in adult words, equity frameworks, pedagogical impact, cross-cultural integration, but he never sank. Because he knew the truth, he was the impact, the proof, the correction. Dr. Rose handed him a proposal, a pilot program to integrate Indigenous oral history into the state history curriculum. You'll be one of 3 student liaisons. We'll train you, compensate you. Liam looked at the paper. Do I have to stop being just a kid? Dr. Rose smiled. You don't have to stop anything. Just keep being honest. Over the next 2 weeks, Alder Valley Prep became something it had never been, curious. History classes turned into conversations. Teachers asked instead of lectured. Students brought in stories, family heirlooms, personal perspectives. Liam wasn't the only voice anymore. He was just the first. Meanwhile, Miss Emerson sat through interview after interview with district investigators. Everything she thought was harmless. Her comments, her assignments, even her silences, were now under a microscope. One investigator read aloud a comment from a former student. "She taught us that native people disappeared. She never said how. She made genocide sound like relocation. That one stung." Then came the worst. A parent shared an old essay graded by Miss Emerson with a giant red X across the phrase, "Indigenous Resistance." Beside it, "Too political. Focus on mainstream facts." Mainstream facts? The words now felt poisonous. She went home that night and opened her laptop. She typed Lakota oral tradition into Google. Then boarding school's history. Then indigenous contributions to U.S. democracy. She read for hours. The more she read, the more she unraveled. What she'd taught, what she believed was neutral, had been built on omission. Every chapter she taught was a closed door. Every comment she made, a key turned to lock it tighter. Across town, Liam stood on a stage again. This time, not in school, but at a youth summit hosted by the State Department of Education. He wore a beaded medallion his grandfather gave him. He carried no notes. He didn't need them. "Truth isn't loud," he said, "but it echoes, and once it's out it doesn't go back in." He talked about textbooks, yes, but also about walking through halls where your language is mocked, your accent questioned, your ancestors ignored. "When I was younger," he said, "I used to wish I didn't speak different. That I didn't stand out. But now I know. The parts of me they tried to erase, that's where my strength lives." The audience stood in ovation. Even the governor's education advisor was spotted wiping a tear. Back at school, Liam's classmates began calling him something else. Not the native kid, not the activist. They called him Mr. Standing Cloud with respect. Even the teachers picked it up. And then something no one expected. Ms. Emerson requested a meeting with Liam privately. He arrived at her classroom. It looked different. Posters of Jefferson and Roosevelt had been replaced by images of Zetkalasa and Chief Joseph. A map of pre-colonial America hung on the wall. She stood beside her desk, hands folded. "Thank you for coming," she said. Liam didn't reply. He waited. Miss Emerson looked at the floor. "I read your grandfather's journal." Liam's breath caught. "How?" "He published it in a small anthology back in the 90s. It's archived now. I found it." Silence stretched. She looked up. "I was wrong." It wasn't a grand speech. There were no tears, no justifications, just 3 words. "I was wrong." Liam didn't say anything at first. He just stared at Miss Emerson. Not in anger, but in something deeper. Something that looked a lot like disbelief. He had prepared himself for defensiveness, for rationalization. What he hadn't prepared for was accountability. "What changed?" he asked finally. Miss Emerson looked out the window. The sky was soft with early spring light. "I thought I knew what it meant to be a teacher," she said. "To control the room, to be the expert. But watching you, I realize teaching isn't about speaking. It's about listening." She turned to him. "I wasn't listening." Liam tilted his head. "You're listening now?" "I'm trying," she said. "I've requested to step away from the U.S. history track. I'm developing a new elective, Indigenous Resistance and Resilience. If the board approves it, I'd like your help." Liam narrowed his eyes. "Why me?" "Because you taught me," she said quietly. "Now maybe we can teach together." He didn't answer right away. Then he nodded once. "I'll think about it." Later that week, Ms. Emerson emailed every student she had ever taught. She admitted her past biases. She included resources to relearn the history she had once filtered. And she asked for feedback, not just on content, but on how she had made them feel in her classroom. The responses were overwhelming. Some forgave her, some didn't, but all of them thanked her for finally naming the thing they were never allowed to call out. Back in Liam's world, momentum was building fast. He was invited to a national conference on youth voices and education reform, held in D.C. His flight and hotel were covered. His name printed in bold on the program, Liam Standing Cloud, student activist and curriculum consultant, Oak County, SD. At the conference, he stood alongside changemakers twice his age, PhDs, directors, policy leaders. But when he spoke, they all listened like students. Curriculum, he said into the mic, isn't neutral. It's a story we choose to tell. And if we leave voices out, we're not telling history, we're telling a lie. He was given a standing ovation again, but the real shift wasn't in conference halls. It was back home. Alder Valley Prep was no longer the same school. History teachers rewrote syllabi. Students proposed clubs focused on marginalized history. The morning announcements now included quotes from indigenous thinkers, not just presidents. And Ms. Emerson, she taught her new elective in a circle. No desks, no podium. She invited tribal elders, guest speakers, artists, storytellers. And at the center of it all was Liam. Sometimes guest speaking, sometimes just sitting silently, watching. One afternoon, during a unit on resistance through language, Miss Emerson paused mid-lesson. "Liam, would you share what your grandfather said about speaking with an accent?" Liam nodded slowly. "He said," Liam began, "that our accent is just the sound of our ancestors trying to survive inside our mouths." The room fell silent, not heavy, sacred. That night, Liam and his grandfather sat on their porch, watching the wind move across the hills. "She asked for my help," Liam said. Wicasa smiled. She found the courage to unlearn. Liam exhaled. "It feels strange, being heard." His grandfather looked at him with eyes full of quiet knowing. "It always does, when your whole life they told you to whisper." Then came the letter. From Stanford University's Youth Research Initiative. They had seen his summit speech, read his published op-ed in the State Journal. They were offering him a summer fellowship, full scholarship, a spot in a lab studying historical narrative and digital storytelling. Liam stared at the letter for a long time. He whispered, "They're listening." Wicasa smiled. "Now, make sure they remember." The last week of school arrived, and something strange happened. Instead of winding down, Alder Valley Prep felt alive, like something new had been planted, and the students could feel it pushing up through the floorboards. There were conversations in hallways about justice, about truth, about whose stories got told and why. In Miss Emerson's new elective, final projects replaced final exams. One student performed a spoken word piece titled, "My Name is Not a Typo." Another presented a visual timeline of indigenous resistance movements since 1492. And one girl, a freshman who once said she hated history, stood up and shared her family's immigration story, beginning with a single sentence. "I didn't know my history mattered until someone like Liam showed me it did." On the last day of class, Ms. Emerson asked a question. "Who owns history?" There was silence. Then Liam stood slowly. "No one owns history," he said, "but we all have a right to carry it." Miss Emerson nodded. "Then carry it well." That afternoon, Liam walked the halls one last time before summer. On his locker was a note taped in blue ink. "Your voice changed more than a classroom. M.E." He smiled. Not for her forgiveness, not for praise, but because change, real change, had happened. And he had lived long enough to see it. Later that night, Liam packed his bag for Stanford. His grandfather sat nearby, repairing an old dream catcher. The house was quiet, but charged with a kind of stillness that felt like ceremony. "I'm scared," Liam admitted. Wicasa didn't look up. "You should be. The road of truth is always hard." Liam nodded, "But I'm going anyway." His grandfather tied one final knot and smiled. "Then, take this with you." He handed him the repaired dream catcher. "Hang it wherever you learn. Let it remind you, the world isn't waiting for permission to change. It's waiting for you to show them how." The next morning, Liam boarded a bus. Not a private car, not a plane, but a Greyhound full of strangers and stories. And somewhere between state lines and sunrise, he looked out the window and whispered, "This is what history sounds like, when it speaks for itself." In the end, Liam didn't just rewrite a history lesson. He rewrote the rules of who gets to tell it. He proved that an accent isn't a flaw, it's a fingerprint. That being different doesn't mean being wrong. And that sometimes the loudest lesson comes from the voice they tried hardest to silence. This wasn't just about one student or one teacher. It was about reclaiming space, rewriting stories, and reminding the world that truth has never needed a permission slip. If this story meant something to you, share it. Drop a comment with your thoughts or where you're watching from. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications, because the next story we tell might just be yours.